Imagine waking up one morning and the sun is gone. Not hidden behind clouds. Not blocked by rain. Gone. The sky above you is a dirty, suffocating gray, and it has been that way for 6 months. The air smells like ash. Your crops are brown and rotting in the ground. Your children are crying because they are hungry and you have nothing left to give them. And nobody, not your priests, not your rulers, not the wisest man in your village, can explain what is happening to the sky. This is not a story from a nightmare. This happened to real people, with real children and real fear and real pain. And the year was 536 AD. If you think there have been bad times in history, wars, plagues, famines, you are right. But historians, climate scientists, and archaeologists have spent decades trying to identify the single worst moment in human history to actually be alive. The debates are long. The candidates are many. But one window keeps rising to the top. One stretch of years so relentlessly, so systematically devastating that Harvard historian Michael McCormick, one of the world's leading authorities on the early medieval world, called it, without hesitation, the beginning of the worst period of human existence ever recorded on this planet. It started in the spring of 536 AD, and if you were alive, you were about to enter something that would take generations to climb out of. You do not know it yet. You wake up somewhere in the Eastern Roman Empire, perhaps in Constantinople, the most powerful city on earth at the time, a city of 500,000 people, a city of aqueducts and marble and trade ships and libraries. Perhaps you are in what is now Italy or Greece or Egypt or the Middle East. You are not a philosopher. You are not a general. You are a farmer, a craftsman, a mother, a soldier, a merchant with a small stall, and a family to feed. You have plans. You have people who depend on you, and you have absolutely no idea what the next 10 years are going to do to you. A volcanic eruption, catastrophic in scale, most likely in Iceland, has just blasted an apocalyptic wall of sulfate aerosols into the stratosphere. Within weeks, those particles spread across the entire northern hemisphere like a slow poison. The sun becomes a pale, blurry smear in the sky. It gives light, but no warmth. Temperatures across Europe and Asia drop by up to 2.5 degrees Celsius almost overnight. That might sound like a small number. It is not a small number. It is the difference between a harvest and a graveyard. Your growing season collapses in a single year. The grain you planted turns yellow and dies in the field. The animals begin to starve alongside you. Then, in 540 AD, another massive volcanic eruption hits. Then, another in 547. Back to back to back, like the Earth itself is trying to finish the job. The volcanic winter does not last a season. It lasts years. Tree ring data from across the planet shows that trees nearly stopped growing between 536 and 541. In China, historical records from 536 describe summer snowfall. In Ireland, ancient annals record crop failures so severe that entire regions were abandoned. The Byzantine historian Procopius, who lived through this and wrote about it in real time, described the sun giving off light without brightness for an entire 18 months straight. Like a sun that had forgotten how to be warm. You are now in year 4 of slow starvation. Your body is thinner than it has ever been. The people around you are thinner. Children are the worst. You can see their ribs. You have started eating things you never thought you would eat. Leather, bark, rats, when you can catch them. You have watched neighbors die of hunger. You have buried people you loved. And then, just when your body is at its most broken, just when your immune system is at its most depleted, the worst thing in human history walks through a port gate in Egypt. 541 AD, the Justinianic Plague. It begins in the port town of Pelusium, in northeastern Egypt, a place where trade ships from across the known world unload cargo and passengers. Nobody notices the rats at first. Nobody thinks about the rats at all. But within weeks, the sailors start dying. Then the merchants. Then the soldiers. Then entire neighborhoods. The bacterium is called Yersinia pestis. You have no word for bacterium. You have no concept of germ theory. You have no way to understand what is killing people. What you can see, what you cannot unsee, is that people around you are developing swellings. Hard, dark, grotesque lumps the size of a fist that erupt in the groin, in the armpit, in the neck. You can see them through the fabric of their clothes. The people who get them begin vomiting blood within days. Their skin darkens as tissue begins to die beneath the surface. Most of them are dead within a week, and you cannot run from it, because nobody knows what it is or where it comes from. Constantinople is hit first among the major cities. By 542 AD, the plague is killing an estimated 5,000 people per day inside the city walls alone. 5,000 people every single day. The streets fill with bodies faster than anyone can remove them. Procopius, watching from inside the city, writes that the living were not able to keep pace with the dead. Survivors began carrying bodies on their backs through the streets because there was no one else to move them. Mass graves were dug and filled and dug and filled again. When the graves ran out, they used abandoned towers as mass burial chambers and piled bodies in layers. When the towers overflowed, they loaded the dead onto ships and pushed them out to sea. The emperor himself, Justinian, contracted the plague and survived. But survival meant nothing. He now ruled a city actively coming apart. Fields went unplanted because the farmers were dead. Ships sat in harbor because the sailors had died. Laws could not be enforced because the guards were gone. The army could not march because the soldiers were dying in the barracks. The entire mechanism of Roman civilization began to fail, gear by gear, like a machine with no one left to run it. And this is something that almost never gets discussed. The survivors were not free to grieve. Desperation has always bred cruelty. And what followed in the streets and in the courts of the Eastern Roman Empire was a systematic brutality that is almost impossible to comprehend from where you are sitting right now. Food had become the most dangerous object in the known world. People who hoarded grain during the famine years were hunted down publicly. Under Byzantine law, one of the most rigidly codified legal systems of the ancient world, theft of food during a famine was punishable by mutilation. You could lose your hand, both hands. In some cases, you could be blinded, your eyes burned out with hot iron instruments, as a public display intended to deter anyone else who might steal to keep their children alive. The punishment was not secret. It was meant to be seen. And punishment was not only for thieves. When entire populations live in terror and cannot understand why people are dying, they find someone to blame. Accusations spread faster than the plague itself. Healers were accused of poisoning their patients. Foreigners were accused of bringing the curse. Anyone who seemed different, anyone who kept to themselves, anyone who survived when their neighbors did not, they became targets. People accused of spreading the sickness were dragged into public squares and tortured. Confessions were beaten out of them. Confessions to things that were biologically impossible. Once the accusation landed, your fate was decided before your trial began. You would be humiliated. You would be beaten. In many cases, you would be executed. And the crowd would watch, because watching someone else be punished was one of the few ways a terrified population could feel like something, anything, was being controlled. Justinian's government enforced strict curfews across Constantinople in an attempt to hold order inside a dying city. Anyone found in the streets after dark was presumed to be looting the homes of the dead. The punishment was swift and public. Executed curfew breakers were sometimes left where they fell, their bodies joining the already staggering pile of the dead, rotting in the streets as a warning to everyone who stepped over them. The psychological damage was unlike anything we have words for. Think about what it means to watch everyone around you die and have no explanation for why, to not know if you are next, to put your child to sleep with a slight fever and not know if they will be alive when the sun comes up. Procopius describes survivors moving through the city with a kind of detached blankness, as if their minds had simply refused to process what their eyes were sending them. What we would recognize today as acute dissociative trauma. But in 542 AD, there was no framework for it, no treatment, no hotline, no one trained to help you survive the thing that was happening inside your own mind while everything outside was collapsing. You couldn't trust your neighbors. You couldn't trust your water. You couldn't trust the air. You couldn't trust your own skin, because the swellings that marked death might be growing inside you right now, too small to feel. Between 541 and 549 AD, the Justinianic Plague killed an estimated 25 to 50 million people across the Mediterranean world and beyond. In some regions, between a third and half of the entire population was erased. Not over a century. Over less than a decade in recurring waves that kept returning every few years like a tide that refused to go out. What followed was not recovery. It was collapse. Trade routes that had existed for centuries disappeared because the merchants were dead. Languages spoken for thousands of years vanished because the last people who spoke them died. Architectural techniques, legal knowledge, agricultural practices, and medical understanding gone. Libraries burned because no one was left to maintain them. Entire cities, once busy and thriving, became overgrown ruins within a single generation. Historian Kyle Harper, whose landmark work on Rome's climate and disease history fundamentally changed how scholars understand this era, argues that the combination of the volcanic winter, the famine, and the Justinianic Plague did not merely weaken the ancient world, it ended it. The civilization that had produced aqueducts, legal codes, global trade, and the first stirrings of scientific thinking was replaced, over the following century, by something smaller, harder, more isolated, and far more afraid. 536 to 549 AD. In Constantinople, in Egypt, in Italy, in Gaul, in the Middle East, that is the window, that is the place, that is the most miserable stretch of human existence in recorded history, not because of one disaster, but because of three arriving in sequence, each one stripping away whatever the last one had left behind until there was almost nothing left to take. The people who survived did not emerge stronger. They emerged hollowed out. They came out believing the universe was fundamentally hostile, that the sky could go dark without warning, that bodies could fail for invisible reasons, that the people in charge could not save you, that nothing you built was guaranteed to last even one more year. That is a belief that entered the human bloodstream in those years. A low, persistent dread, a sense that civilization is fragile, that warmth and food and safety are temporary, that something can always come without warning and take all of it away. You feel that sometimes. Not in the same form, not with the same stakes, but in the same part of you. That quiet animal fear underneath everything else, the one that whispers that the good days might be running out. You woke up this morning with the sun in the sky, food in your kitchen, people alive around you, walls between you and the cold. And the last time your ancestors woke up and had all of those exact same things, they lost every single one of them before the decade was over.